not the language police. You know, what am I going to stop them and write them a summons right then? You know, so I'm not saying a word. And by the fourth hole, sure enough, one of the chiefs goes, "So, what do you do?" Well, I'll tell you, if it won't change the way you're talking. You know, GD this, why would it change? I said, "Well, I'm a chaplain." And the one goes, "Oh, Jesus Christ, Father, I'm sorry." I said, "No reason to apologize." I said, "You know, let's continue playing. You talk how you want to talk." And that's what I let him do. And it was interesting because one of the, about 2 holes later, one of the chiefs says, "You know what? This is like the 10th anniversary of when my daughter died. She was 8 years old when she died." And he says, it hurts as much as if it were yesterday. And back then I was a good enough golfer that I always let him hit first off the tee, and then I would follow him and I'd hit my ball in the same direction because we could walk together. You know, here's the problem though. Men want to measure themselves by what they do and not who they are. You see, God wants to call us to be men of character. And there are issues in your lives that He wants to work on, that He knows. And I don't care how old you are. You know, some of you guys are old here. I mean old. You're old. That's all I can tell you. And you know what? The truth is this. There are still character issues that have been dogging you for life. The inability to apologize when you do wrong. You know, you use excuses, "Well, you can't teach an old dog new tricks." You know, my friend of mine, Charlie, when I pastored my last church, he came, one day I said to him, "Hey, Charlie, man. I said, you and Jackie have been married over 50 years. You know, how often do you tell her that you love her?" He says, "What?" He says, "Listen, the day that we got married, I said to her, 'Jackie, I love you. And if it ever changes, I'll let you know.'" And he never told her again until he was diagnosed with lung cancer and was given 6 months to live. He made it 2 years. Doctors were just amazed. Every single day he told Jackie, "I love you." Jackie needed to hear that a long time before. The issue of not being able to apologize is so rare that a woman hears an honest-to-God apology from her husband that says, "This is what I did. It must have hurt you deeply, and this is how I envision it hurt you. And I apologize. What can I do to make it better? Will you forgive me?" It is the rare man that can apologize that way. It's a character issue if you cannot encourage your wife with compliments and encouraging words. I had a woman come up in a church I was preaching with recently, and it was afterwards, and she came up and she says, "Pastor, would you pray with me? My marriage." You know, this lady was obviously in her 60s or so. She said, "We've been married a long time, but it's just rough." And I just began to pray with her. I said, "Lord, I don't know what's going on here, but if her marriage is like a lot of others, then her spirit is so dry because it's been so long since she has heard her husband say something nice to her." And I could feel her fingers tighten on mine, and she says, "Yes, that's it. Do you know why I prayed that? Because it's the typical marriage, and that's a character issue. See, God wants to come and work on our character. And I spend the most time here tonight, and anytime I give this talk, with home based with the idea of committing to God and needing to commit to God and growing your character, because this is where the most outs in baseball take place. At home and at first base. Now, how do you grow character? Okay, if you're writing it, I guess I could come over here. If you have a baseball diamond, this one first says what? Commitment, and this one says, and the way you get from commitment to God to working on your character is along the base path line of truth. You have to have truth spoken into your life. You have to be willing to have people in your life to whom you give permission to speak the tough things. You know, years ago, I have 3 fantastic kids. If you met my kids, you would want them to be your kids. You know, I have raised them from, when they were very young to be articulate, to be able to hold a conversation with another adult. And adults come to me and say, I just love spending time with your kids. Now, when they were younger, I was pretty protective of them, overly protective of them. And one day we went over to this guy's house, and we stayed there for the weekend with he and his wife, and my kids are with me, and we go for a long walk, and we're going to leave in about half an hour. We've been there the whole weekend. And Rob comes to me and says, hey John, let's go for a little walk before you leave. Okay. So we're walking along. He says, listen, you're my best friend, and I need to tell you this. You are way too strict with your children. You're going to lose them if you don't lighten up. Now, what would be your response to hearing something like that? Oh, Rob, thank you. Is there any other way you want to tell me I'm a loser? No, we don't react that way, And I didn't react that way. I could feel myself getting all, who are you? Just because you have 3 perfect kids, who are you to tell me what to do? But he had to speak truth into my life. And that afternoon, on the ride home, I started easing up on my kids. Now, that came at a time when my oldest daughter was just hitting teenage years. Teenage daughters often don't like to be around their dads. Is that right? Yeah. Yep. It's too embarrassing. David, I'm going to let you get away with that one, all right? Because you're the man. Oh, he points to Tom and says, it was Tom that said it. Listen, because of the change in my life, because Rob spoke truth into my life, and I made a character change. When I dropped my girls off at school, my son off at school too, my daughter would get out and come around to the window and give me a kiss. Right in front of all her friends. And a day never went by that didn't happen. And it's because someone was willing to speak the truth in my life. We don't like to speak truth into other people's lives. I was having that discussion with my wife once years ago, that we're afraid to speak truth into other people's lives. Do you agree with me or disagree? She disagreed with me. Can you imagine that? It's like the first time in our marriage. I said to her, we're over at my mom and dad's house in my grandmother's old apartment. We're having this discussion. She's going, no, people are willing to speak the truth. I go, hon, I'll prove it to you. And because I've been sitting there, I have ADD, so I'm sitting there and I'm playing with this can of rubber cement.